That Tom Hanks movie set in an airport called The Terminal from 2004. Steven Spielberg produced it. Tom Hanks starred as Victor Navorsky, an Eastern European tourist stranded at New York's JFK airport when a military coup in his homeland invalidates his passport. Maybe you remember it, leaving him stranded and unable to return to the U.S. or from the U.S. to his homeland. Well, could this have been radio sportscaster Mark Daniels' life? Covering the happenings of the Packer Nation from Lambeau Field for almost 50 years. Did he have a bunk stashed somewhere down one of those dark halls under the old stadium seating, dimly lit, hot plate, a bunk next to that boiler? What was life really like at Lambeau for Mark Daniels? Author Mark Daniels is our next person of interest on the Joe Simon podcast.
And now, broadcasting from Titletown, USA, here's Joe Simon.
Well, we really are turning the tables today. We're going to have some fun. We usually talk about pre and post retirement financial strategies. Every once in a while, we have a person of interest feature because they're interesting. From Grammy Award winners to one of the most famous men's health and fitness models, a physician showing us how to deal with pain without medications. And today we talked to radio sportscaster who covered the Green Bay Packers for almost 50 years, now retired, and new author of the book, A Life at Lambeau. Welcome in, Mark Daniels.
Hello, Joe. How are you?
There he is. You know the voice. And some of you, Mark, I'm doing great. And I really appreciate paging through your book. It's an easy read. It's a great gift for Labor Day is coming up, Thanksgiving, you name it. It's a great book. And, you know, it's not just for guys. We're going to get into the book today, several chapters. But, man, I read it in a weekend, and it was a good read. Yeah, and you know what, Mark, the first question I want to talk about, and this is going to be our segue question. As you know, pre and post retirement is what we do here, what we talk about, what we've been doing for over 40 years. And you're actually an expert in that. So once you got into the red zone leading up to retirement and then crossing the goal into retirement, you've been there. Can you just take a minute to tell our viewers what that was like? Because I'll tell you what, some of the biggest challenges we hear of from people who are into the retirement zone or can't get all the way in there is they're having a hard time preparing for that. Can you just chat for a minute about that?
I kind of mentally prepared, Joe, before I actually took the step of calling it a career. I thought about it quite a bit, and my career was one where I put in a lot of very unusual hours. I wasn't a 9-to-5 job, just wondering how I'm going to get out of the office. I mean, I was up at 3:30 every day to go into the studios to start preparing morning sportscasts. I'd be working games, high school games, college games, Packer games at night, on the road, on the weekends. It was 6 and 7 days. I was really grinding, and I knew I couldn't keep up that pace forever. And I also wanted to end working, if you will, on my own terms. A very volatile business is the media. People come and go, firings all the time, format changes in radio. I didn't want to deal with any of that. I wanted to just finish the season, my last season when I realized that was coming, and get on with it. And the transition for me personally was very smooth. I didn't really look back, have second thoughts. Of course, I miss covering the Packers and being around the team and the guys and games and all that sort of thing. But I was ready for it, and financially I prepared well, so all's good. It allowed me time to sit at the laptop I'm staring at right now and crank out a few chapters about that experience.
Well, that's my first question really is, how do you just wake up one day and go, you know what, I think I've got enough content here. I think I'm going to write a book. How did that happen?
Well, if I could go in one room over here in the house, I'd show you the stacks and stacks and stacks of stuff that I've accumulated over the years, notes, programs, magazines, audio. And so I knew I had a vast library of resources available to me. But it wasn't until I had a little chat with my dad at a campfire several years ago where he said, you've been doing this a long time. Why don't you put it on paper? And so I thought, maybe I should. And so I started laying the groundwork then for maybe a book. I wasn't sure I was really going to do it, but then, uh, he kind of convinced me it's something you ought to just do to do. Don't do it to get on a bestseller list. Don't do it to win Pulitzers or anything like that. Do it to do it. And I did it. But it was a long process. I
Yeah.
started the groundwork several years ago, continued on my job with Midwest Communications, and kind of put it on the back burner. But as I was closing in on that retirement age that we were talking about a minute ago, I started really getting busy, formatting it, outlining how I want to go about chapters, who I want to interview, and all of that sort of thing. But this was brand new to me. I was a talker, not a writer, so it was a really trial by fire, trying to figure out how to become a better writer and produce a book.
It's called A Life at Lambeau. It's a brand new book. It's green and gold with a dashing young gentleman on the front wearing a Packer logo. My favorite Packer logo. You've got to see the book.
Yeah,
That
that's the
Go ahead.
'60s logo. Yeah, with the running back or whatever, and the little dots or stars for Milwaukee and Green Bay. Yeah,
I
it's one
love
of my
that logo.
favorites.
Yeah. So Mark, one of the unique things as a fan looking in and a listener following your career, and I even go back to your high school days and then to WDUZ, a local Green Bay radio station, et cetera. We'll get into that. But one of the things that I think is very interesting is so you covered the Packers at Lambeau Field during what I'm going to call the old Lambeau days. And then you were there during the new Lambeau days. So let's talk about the actual venue, the stadium. What was that like to go from old to new? Maybe you've got some interesting stories on both sides of that question.
It was such a Spartan stadium when I grew up. It was just a chain link fence surrounding, the steel beams and structure going up. You could look right into the back wall of the concourse through the chain link fence. The administration building was really small and Spartan. And it was all parking lot. I mean, it was all parking lot more than anything else. So uh, it was a really basic, but still, when it was built, snazzy looking place. But by the '60s, when I started attending games, I mean, it was still wooden bleachers when I first. Then they put the aluminum bleachers
Yeah, I
down.
didn't know
Uh,
that. I didn't know that.
yeah, yeah, it was a few splinters, for the first couple of
Yeah.
games, where. But yeah, then they installed the aluminum seating, so that was a big step. And then they started making the change, going to the corrugated wall around it, and then obviously starting to realize that we're gonna have to do something here to make a little more money. So they built some skyboxes, private suites, and then obviously after the referendum, it's now the palace that it is. But no, it was very Spartan when I was hanging around as a kid and very early in my covering career.
So you've had the pleasure of being in the original press box that was at the stadium, which gave that view that people didn't realize until the skyboxes were built. You were above the bowl, you could look down,
Right.
and it was quite a view. But then the skybox came in, and then everybody that was in a skybox kind of got a taste of that. Can you talk about maybe you can recollect the first few skyboxes coming in and really changing the face of Lambeau Field? What was that like?
Well, that was Judge Perrins's plan, in the early '80s, maybe '83, '84, somewhere in there. He realized that the Packers needed to generate more revenue, and private suites were the rage all around the league, especially with new stadium construction, things like that. And the Packers had to get on board. So the initial plan was for 24 private suites to ring the south or north, the north end of the stadium. Those suites sold out like in hours. Okay. They were worried about, gee, these are going to cost a lot of money. Sold out in a blink. And so they decided, let's ring the whole stadium with suites and eventually another deck. So it was just keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak,
Yeah.
to make sure they remained financially viable as a league partner.
You do a great job explaining that in the book. You get into the politics of the Packers and Bob Harlan. You know what? I'm not going to go there because people have to pick up the book to find out. It's an interesting chapter or two on really how Bob Harlan became the face of the organization for a while. Politics, Packers, business players. You got to pick up the book and find out the details. That's my big teaser. We're not going to go into that. Let's transition over here, though, to uh, during, I can go back to the Bart Starr days, and I can talk about Phil Bankston transitioning from Lombardi. The book covers that. One of the things I didn't see a lot of, and I'm really interested in getting your opinion on this because you could talk all day about this, is that day Magic went down, number 7, and number 4 came off the bench to kind of clean up the day. Do you remember
Mm-hmm.
that? Can you talk a little bit about
Oh, yeah.
that one?
Remember that game? Don was such a fun player. Okay, and he really got Packer fans enthused again when there was very little enthusiasm post Forrest Gregg. It was a bad time. People were
Agreed.
grumpy. They were staying away. There were no shows. Guys were getting in trouble off the field. They really needed something positive to come along to get people excited about the team. And it was the kid from the University of Virginia. The 89 season was fantastic. He had the injuries, but there was still a lot of belief that he might be the guy. And
Yeah.
in 1992, of course, Ron Wolf was on board already. Mike Holmgren had been hired. They had traded for Brett Favre, but Holmgren says there was just absolutely no way Favre was prepared to be an NFL starting quarterback. And he had to go with the veteran Mikowski to start that 92 season. How long that was going to go, if he stayed healthy, remains to be seen. But that became a moot point when a former Wisconsin Badger, Tim Crumry, rolled up on Mikowski's ankle at Lambeau Field pretty early in that game, you'll recall, and knocked him out. And so Favre went in, fumbled the ball like 4 or 5 times, just
Yeah.
was throwing it all over the yard. He
Didn't he
did
catch
hit
his own pass in
Sharp.
his first pass?
Oh, that was the week before in Tampa when the Packers were getting blown out, and it was so frustrating for Holmgren.
Okay.
He just threw Favre in there, yeah, and his first pass was batted right back to him. But the following week, he went in there. I think he hit Sharp for a touchdown, but again, fumbled the ball a couple of times. Was just really reckless. Had no idea what he was doing until that final drive where he went, I don't know, 90 odd yards. I remember that was a long drive. They were backed up with a couple of minutes left before he hit Kendrick Taylor for that game winner, and the legend was born. Mikowski never
Yeah.
got a sniff of the field again as a Packer, which was too bad. I really, Don was great when I interviewed him about that whole thing. And he says it really wasn't the ankle that did him in, although that was the ultimate. But the shoulder injuries he suffered, he just
Oh yeah.
debilitating, really difficult to overcome. And then the rest we know with Favre's history. He was an unbelievable player, maybe the greatest in franchise history.
So you've covered the Packers. I mean, you were covering the Packers when no one knew you were covering the Packers, live from Beamert Street, and then on to the 610 Mary Hill Drive, UW or WGBP. Let's talk about WGBP. We've got a flashback memory of you that might scare you there a little bit. Look at that youngster
Yeah,
there with the
Hermie.
big
Yeah,
grin down there with the plaid shirt on. That was Mark Daniels pre all world. And let's
oh
talk
yeah, right.
about those moments because there's some important seeds that are taking place in that snapshot there. Can you dial back and think about those times
Sure.
and really how that sort of launched you?
Well, it did. I mean, I was fascinated with radio as a youngster. I just loved listening to guys call games, and I listened to them all from around the state and the Midwest and everybody. So I really enjoyed radio. And when I was a sophomore, I think that's when the two teachers, Clayton Tunin, who was like kind of the journalism teacher, English teacher, and Mr. Ledvinup, Denny Ledvinup, who was the engineering guy, and Clayton was kind of the production guy, came up with the idea of this radio station that they were going to apply for a license from the Federal Communications Commission for a 10-watt educational non-commercial station. It'd be an over-the-air thing. We'd have the antenna stick on the top of the school, and we'd have our own little radio station. I said, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And so from that point on, Clayton Toonan pulled me aside and he said, "Look, we're just getting this thing going. I know you're an underclassman, but we want somebody here that's going to be here for a couple of years to kind of
A
just see this
succession
thing."
plan.
Yeah. We don't want to let a senior who's going to be here for 4 more months run the show. We'd like to have somebody in charge to develop this thing. And I had such an extreme interest, they realized that. So I said, "Here, you be the station manager, the first station manager, and take the reins in this thing and help build it up." And at that point, I knew I had an idea what my career was going to be, but then I knew that this is it. I wanted to be on the air. I wanted to talk about sports. I wanted to do games, and we didn't do games initially. That came a little later when I was a senior, and then a few others who came behind me are still doing games, like
Yeah,
Kevin
yeah,
Harlan, who was so
yeah.
great to have that quote at the top of the front of the book. But
Yes.
so yeah, WGBP was a major part of my story and my journey through broadcasting. No question about it.
So what's intriguing to me about this that really nobody, and I went through the ranks too. So I was 4 years behind
I
Mark.
know.
Same, to full disclosure. Same high school, same radio station, same people. Um, but what I think is the story within the story, really deep in this, is the Norbratine fathers. And
Yeah,
let's talk about that because Mark, you actually walked back into their shadow when you joined Midwest Communications. They were originally
exactly.
based out of the old, what we would call the WBAY building, but as your book clearly points out, and a lot of people who follow this history, it was owned by the Knights of Columbus initially. Financial Times, you outline it in your book. So here you are walking in, and actually, my dad went to that high school when it was called Central Catholic for one
Catholic.
year.
Yeah, that was the
Um,
Columbus building. Yeah.
converted the Columbus building. I don't know if it went from high school to Columbus building or if it was just named that and it was a high school. But a radio station and a TV station were born there, and really the paperwork was completed by the Norbratine fathers.
Right. Yeah. Well, the owner of Midwest Communications, the Wright family, Duke Wright, bought the stations WBAY AM and FM radio at the time from the Norbertines. They were looking to sell and divest themselves of the broadcast side of things. They really didn't need that. And so Duke Wright purchased it from the Norbertines. And the other bidder, he outbid actually, was Bart Starr, who had a group who was interested in purchasing it at the time. And I believe that was about 1976, 1977 era, right when I was finishing up high school. And then lo and behold, a couple of years later, there I am working for them in that building, which has so much Packer history as well. I mean, I think they had their
Yes.
36 NFL championship party there, banquet there in that auditorium at the BAY building. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. It's just interesting in Green Bay how you can grow up next to a player, a famous player's son. Hint, hint. You can go to high school with some of these people. Mark, you shared off Mike in our sort of our pre-meeting a while ago a little bit about Bart Starr
Yeah.
Jr. Anything you want to mention about goofing around with Bart Starr Jr. as a kid?
It's not like we were best buds, but he was around the corner and just a little street over. I had my little collection of guys on Beamer Street, the Beamer Street Raiders football team, as I called them, and Bart and his guys were just a couple blocks away. But I happened to come across him on my brother's paper route. We became friends, goofed around a little bit. Got to meet Bart and Cherry as young parents, and not NFL Hall of Fame quarterback, just young parents living in my neighborhood, and that friendship has lasted a lifetime. Just a month ago, I saw Bart Jr. at the Packer Hall of Fame banquet, and the couldn't wait to say he swiped the book off the shelf at the Packer Pro Shop that weekend to go back, because I interviewed him very early in the process when I was talking about my youth, and he was fantastic. And there's a couple of cute stories about how my parents and I interacted with Bart Jr.'s parents and that family. So, but he wasn't the only
Yeah.
one, Joe. I mean, Gary Knaffel,
Yeah.
who was the PA announcer, of my youth at the stadium.
Yeah.
I had his
Yeah.
sons right with us at Promontory and St. Agnes
Yeah.
School. There were
Yeah.
others. Tony Canadeo lived nearby. Jerry Kramer lived nearby. They were all around. Dave Hanner. And so I got to meet these guys, these Packer legends. No, not all of them were legendary, but Packer players. When I was
Yeah.
a kid, and it was cool, and got to know the guys that were my age that had a dad who was a Packer, and so I became intertwined with the organization at a young age, and those connections continued to develop and grow as I lived and worked in Green Bay my entire career, and I got to know everyone on the executive committee. I got to the people running the business side. I just got in and around that franchise probably more deeply than any other reporter might have.
So it's a new book by author Mark Daniels, retired radio sportscaster. He's retired but not tired. That's his new tour
Yeah,
byline that I'm giving him for today. I'm retired but not tired. The book is out there. You can go on Amazon. You can go to the Packer Pro Shop. So you stop in
right.
for a game. You want to buy a T-shirt. You want to get something special for your lady. While you're there, pick up a book. It's on the shelf. You can't miss it. If we could, let's take a look at that cover one more time. You mentioned, Mark, when we were talking about the cover, there was kind of a funny story about the cover. Can you tell us just a bit about that?
Yeah, I had we were getting close to press time, and my editor and publisher we had another photo that he kind of liked. Same kind of view. I'm in the Stadium Bowl, standing there, but I've got a long sleeve shirt on. I've got my glasses, but they're transition lenses, and it was a sunny day, so they're completely black. And in the back of the stadium, up on the top, you could see the flag flying, but it's at half mast. And I'm going, "What's this? A funeral picture?" I said, I can't do that on the cover of the book. And
No.
so I called my publisher. We're days away from going to press, and I'm starting to panic. He says, well, have your wife go out there, take a couple of pictures outside the stadium, with the phone. It might work, and we'll see what we can do, blah, blah, blah. And so we do. She goes out and takes a couple of nice shots, and we're driving home, and all of a sudden my phone rings, and it's my daughter from Minneapolis who calls and says, get your butt back to Lambeau Field. You are not having your mom on a cell phone take a photo for the cover of your book. And I said, okay. I said, I've hired a professional photographer. We need a high resolution, professionally taken shot. So get over there. She's already there. She's waiting for it. I already paid for it. She said, well, she still won't tell me how much that she paid to do this. But anyway, the girl was great. Rachel was fantastic. We got around the stadium. I called my Packer friends to see if we can get inside the stadium to take a couple of extra shots. They said, no problem. Let us in there. It was a beautiful sunny day. And I'm sorry. And there, I hit the computer. And there's the photo that turned out. A funny story about the cover that probably should be in the book, but it might be even better, a story about the book, actually.
All right, so we have to jump into the fast lanes here. I've got a lineup of
All right.
questions, maybe take 30 seconds or less. But
Sure.
the one that's at the top of my list is homegrown Packers. I gave you a couple hints in the list there. I'll throw this one out, and I don't mean to catch you off guard, but I've got a story about this guy. I actually worked with him for 1.5 years while in high school. Charlie Ulmer. Does that name ring a bell?
It does ring a bell, but I know he wasn't a really good player. I can tell you that. I don't
No.
think he really made an impact.
He was from Pulaski, and
Yeah.
his dad was the famous Super Ron of the grocery chain that was
There we
once
go.
existing. I didn't know if you'd remember. He played during the Bart Starr era for, I think, what was it at that time, 4 preseason games. They gave him the
Yeah,
number
well, he played
99. He was a
6.
giant
Yeah.
of a man, and that was and how I know he played was he carried around the check. Apparently, the Packers have a policy, at least then, when Bart Starr was coach and general manager, they would cover the cost for you to go back home, and they would determine the traveling cost. So they wrote a check out and gave it to him, and it was $19 because his home was Pulaski, and he kept the check. He never cashed it. He would show
Oh my
it.
God.
Yeah, but what about
Packer
Billy
books are still
Schrader? What about
unbalanced.
Larry
Yeah.
Krause? Any of those people?
Larry Krause, I remember from St. Norbert. Yeah, had a great kickoff return, I think, for a touchdown in his career with the Packers. I think it was in Pittsburgh, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, he was one. Bud Keys, the quarterback, I called his games at West High School, went to Wisconsin and was a late 10th round or something draft choice by the Packers. Was another kid that was fun. So there have been a few of Green Bay people or guys that wound up either in uniform or somehow involved with that team.
Very interesting. How about J.J. Watt? Did you ever hear the story of how he almost became a Packer but didn't because no one returned the phone call?
Yeah, I saw that story, but that was again at the very end of JJ's career after some debilitating injuries. I know he went to Arizona to finish, and he he was fine there. I have no problem with the Packers taking a pass on a end of the line JJ Watt. Drafting TJ Watt instead of Kevin King is a much more plausible story. But I never begrudge the Packers because they didn't want to take a chance on an aging JJ. Great player, Hall of Famer, no question. But I don't think it would have been worth it to bring him in at that point.
Next question, Monday Night Football. It might have been the first Monday Night Football game played at Green Bay against the Washington Redskins at the
Yeah.
time. I remember the lighting. I was there with Nick Canadeo, Tony's nephew. We sat in
Mm-hmm.
the south end zone, and lo and behold, with 4 seconds left in the game, it came down to the Redskins completing that kick. Were you there,
Yeah,
and can
Mark
you tell us
Mosley.
a little bit about that?
Yeah, wasn't the first Monday night game, but the highest scoring Monday night game. The first Monday night game they played was in '79 against New England. And the reason they hadn't had one in Lambeau was, you're right, the lighting was substandard for the high res television cameras. So they got that figured out. But that game in '83, 48-47, was just ridiculous. Dickey and Theismann trading bombs and touchdowns. Stenerud hitting the field goal late to push him back in front. Mark Mosley missing the short one at the end to secure the win. Absolutely phenomenal game. Yeah, I was up in the press box the whole time, and I got to both locker rooms actually, and I was looking for Mark Mosley to hear his explanation of the miss when I ran into another Mark on that Redskin team who would later become the president of the Packers, and Mark Murphy, which was the first time I met him. We laugh about that story in the visiting
Unbelievable.
locker room at
I don't think a
Lambeau.
lot of people know that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he was a good player for the Redskins
Yeah.
for a
Oh,
while.
yeah. Wasn't he
Murphy.
safety?
Yeah, yeah, safety. Yeah.
All right, let's transition. So you're more than a Packer reporter. You had a news background leading up to that, which
Yeah.
my personal belief, made you a better sports reporter. But let's transition to high school because I'm sure you've got some great local stories there. And actually, the high school story that comes to my mind, and then I want to get to UWGB in a minute, is this guy out of St. JFK Prep, St. Nazianz, Wisconsin. A lot
Oh,
of
Mickey.
people won't remember this guy, but people that follow you, Mark, from maybe the beginning will remember, and we got to bring him up. Mickey Crow, just the name.
No,
Can you talk a second about Mickey Crow?
I think a lot of people certainly know who Pete Maravich was. The floppy socks, the long hair, the just disheveled look, but the guy was an absolute wizard with a basketball. Well, Mickey Crow was kind of Wisconsin's Pete Maravich, a tiny JFK prep, a school of maybe 80 kids in St. Nazianz. His dad, Marty, who had coached at Marinette Catholic Central for years, was his head coach. And he was a phenom that could shoot it from anywhere. He had just a crazy over the head release, spinning the ball. But he was phenomenal. And I got a chance to see him play at Promontory against the Cadets. Literally would come across half court with the ball on the dribble and launch from there.
And Mark, this is before the 3-point circle.
Oh, yeah. And he
So
was
he
one of
didn't
the,
get full credit.
I think until Anthony Pieper of Wasaki broke his scoring record, I think he was the leading all-time scorer in Wisconsin basketball for quite a while. Just a crazy, crazy guy that ran into a lot of personal issues outside of high school and stuff like that. An amazing story, but I happy to say I did get a chance to see him knock down a few in the Cadets old gym.
And my understanding is there's a guy, a graduate of Marquette University, who sort of followed the life and times of Mickey Crow. Over and Back is the name of the book. Not that we're promoting other books here today, but that's a phenomenal
No,
book,
but
Over
I've
and
never
Back.
seen that.
Yeah, it's still out there. It's a quick read. It really gets into the tumultuous life of somebody that just was off a beat when it came to life in general. But once he stepped on the stadium, it or on the floor, it felt like everything slowed down for him, and
Yeah,
he
yeah,
got it. He
yeah. No,
I would have loved to see him
his,
excel.
that was his place of comfort, and there's no question about it. Everything else was uncomfortable for him in his life, unfortunately.
So let's talk about the early years of UWGB basketball. This little university that started out on the outskirts of Green Bay. All of a sudden, they have a basketball team. I believe when they first started, were they D2 or D3?
Oh, they were NAIA, actually, Dave Buss's first teams. And I still see
Dave
guys
Buss.
from those teams around Green Bay, every once in a while, Pat Joyce among them and stuff like that. So, yeah, it was fun. I got on the beat um, back in Green Bay, and they'd already been playing for a couple of seasons, but Dave Buss had a very talented team and took them to NAIA tournaments. Then they went into Division II, ran into John Chaney, who had his best days at Temple University, but he was at Chaney State before then, and it was a great rivalry. And so those Dave Buss teams were really, really good. And Tom Anderson, Ron Ripley were local kids that I know.
Casey
Not only,
Zukowski.
yeah, Casey Zukowski a little bit after that, but the Anderson boys were like the Stars right down the street from where I grew up, and we had 3-on-3 games with Tom and Larry and Paul Anderson, who also played at GB, along with me and my two buddies from Beamer Street. We got our tails whipped by the Anderson boys, but nonetheless, so that was kind of neat to suddenly be covering a guy that I used to goof around with and shoot in the driveway with. And that's kind of the whole point of my book, again, to get back to it, Joe, is that just those kind of weird connections you just don't see
Right.
very often. But the GB program, I stayed close with throughout, covered them almost throughout. And in my chapter talking about some of that, I visited with Dick Bennett, who, of course,
Yes.
got into the NCAAs for the first time. But there was Dave Buss, there was Dick Lean, who famously fainted in his introductory press conference. One of the great stories I remember. And then Bennett came on with son Tony and took this thing to new heights. And they've been, a team I've followed very closely, both the guys and the girls ever since.
Excellent, Mark. We're out of time. I want to see.
All right.
I want to see the book up again, Christian. If we could look at that, I want to encourage people. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Here's the book. You can get it at the Packer Pro Shop. Make it easy. You can go on Amazon right now and order it. And there's other sources too. Mark, is there a social media site people can click in and get some comments, and maybe when you're making appearances or things, get
Yeah,
the book autographed, anything like that?
Yeah, well, the word's out now. Everyone in Green Bay knows my last name is Wasselchuk, but Mark Wasselchuk, and if you can spell it right, you'll find it on Facebook, and I'll keep you posted on everything going on with the book and signings. I got a couple more coming up here in the next few weeks, so I hope to see some folks, and it's been fun so far reconnecting with not only characters in the book, but neighbors and friends who know those characters, and that's why I think it's kind of striking a chord, Joe. To tell you the truth, it's
Wow.
really a Green Bay kid's dream come true story, and I hate to be that kind of guy, but it is. I just had a
Yeah.
blast living my life, watching the greatest football team in the National Football League.
Well,
Couldn't get
thank you
much
for
better.
all of your work. I know it was a labor of love, and it was probably very difficult to tear away from something that is more than just a job. It's really in your blood. There's green and gold in that blood over there.
Oh,
And we want to
still
thank you
is.
again, Mark. Yeah.
You bet, Joe.
So
My
we're out of
pleasure.
time,
A lot of
but
fun.
but thank you so much. And as we usually say, have a prosperous day, and we'll talk again soon.
You bet. Thanks, Joe.
You've been listening to the Joe Simon Podcast. Big ideas with powerful stories and real-time solutions. Business succession planning, executive benefits, employee benefits, tax beneficial savings, and more. Remember, information discussed here today is dated and not specific to your situation. Always seek personal counsel from qualified advisors. Joe Simon is a licensed insurance agent in the state of Wisconsin. Licensed to advise on accident and health, life insurance, disability insurance, and annuities, as well as qualified long-term care insurance.